Tittle Tattle is underway, your weekly media analysis show for supporters only in its entirety. So if you only get a short clip of this, consider joining the editorial board on Locals, Rockfin, or Patreon. The FCC commissioner is urging CBS to release the entire transcript from the Harris 60 Minutes interview. This is coming from, well, everybody's talking about it, but this is specifically New York Post discussing, quote, all right, my FCC colleague, Republican Commissioner Nathan Symington, has been very active on this. What he's pointed out is the news distortion rule is a very, very narrow rule at the FCC. In almost every case, it doesn't apply because it could get into sort of editorial decisions that are protected by the First Amendment. But what he said is that CBS should release the transcript. Commissioner Carr, Brendan Carr, said on Mornings with Maria Tuesday. So this all goes back to the interview on 60 Minutes with Kamala Harris, which we will play a clip of in a second. And the controversy is that there were two answers essentially released related to a question about Israel. And some people, like Trump, are saying that they selectively edited deceptively to make Kamala Harris look good. And then CBS says, no, we're just strapped for time in our program and we cut one short version. And then people saw a longer version that we released and there was nothing nefarious about it. Now, this is the reason this all becomes even more controversial is because this is not the only issue that CBS is dealing with right now. For instance, there is now claims from House Speaker Johnson that they also edited him. Now, this is on a different show. I think Face the Nation, right? It says House Speaker Mike Johnson rips CBS News for trimming down his Sunday interview on Face the Nation, charging was part of a pattern of undermining conservatives at the Tiffany Network. Quote, CBS has been under fire for selectively editing their interviews to promote Democrats and undermine Republicans. Yesterday, they chose to cut 5 important minutes out of my nearly 15-minute interview. You can be the judge as to why. Let's watch. This was the clip, and this is 58 seconds long. This is the clip that aired.
Does the U.S. have no sway over Prime Minister Netanyahu?
The work that we do diplomatically with the leadership of Israel is an ongoing pursuit around making clear our principles.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We are not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
Do we have a real close ally in Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I think, with all due respect, the better question is, do we have an important alliance between the American people and the Israeli people? And the answer to that question is yes. And
while the war in the Middle East has dominated.
That's a 58.
It was so bad.
It's a 58-second clip that, then you hear him talking as he goes on to the rest of the package. And here's the statement from CBS. This is what they have come out with. Of course, they're also saying, hey, if Trump has a problem, come on the show and we'll talk to you. Former President Donald Trump is accusing 60 Minutes of deceitful editing of our October 7th interview with Vice President Kamala Harris. That is false. 60 Minutes gave an excerpt of our interview to Face the Nation that used a longer section of her answer than that on 60 Minutes. Same question, same answer, but a different portion of the response. When we edit any interview, whether a politician, an athlete, or movie star, we strive to be clear, accurate, and on point. The portion of her answer on 60 Minutes was more succinct, which allows time for other subjects in a wide-ranging 21-minute long segment. Remember, Mr. Trump pulled out of his interview with 60 Minutes and the Vice President participated. Our long-standing invitation to former President Trump remains open. If he would like to discuss the issues facing the nation and the Harris interview, we would be happy to have him on 60 Minutes. I will show you what Dan Abrams now with News Nation is saying. And, I agree with a little bit of what he has said, and I disagree with a little bit. He has somebody also who I believe from NPR opining about how this is like kind of a nothing burger, but a controversy that CBS has made worse with the way it has handled it. Yes. Let me tell you this first, though. Maybe you're watching this and you're thinking, I don't know, I must be drunk because this doesn't make any sense. No, you're not. Because you know what? When you drink AllisonWinePromo.com, you don't really need to drink that much. It's amazing wine, and you'll be satisfied after just one glass. And that way, you will know that it's just the crazy world around you and the terrible editing on the news that just makes things that much more insane. You are not buzzed. You are just watching the world today. AllisonWinePromo.com is where you can join my wine club, get 6 amazing bottles of wine every 3 months. You always have a gift. Say you're not really a wine drinker, but you have friends who are, family members, sign a family member up for it, or just get the bottles every 6 months. Sorry, 3 months, 6 bottles every 3 months. And then you always have a present. They come from extremely limited productions, small vineyards, 5th generation, 200 years old, hand-picked grapes, some between 6 and 9,000 feet, Chile, Argentina, France, Spain. My aunt, my dad's younger sister, just joined the club, and she told me they are over the top. She loves them, and she's not saying that because she's my aunt, and she knows wine. And I'm not meaning that as an insult, Aunt Kiri. Anyway, AllisonWinePromo.com. Okay, so let's show real fast what, just a quick clip, couple minutes of what Dan Abrams is saying, because, you know, I think a lot of journalists, including myself, can agree with some of this stuff. Okay, we've all edited in the news business. There's no way when you do, one time I did an investigation, I sat down for 2 hours with the guy I was interviewing. Okay. They gave me 8 minutes in the A block and 7 minutes in the B block. That's an insane amount of time. 15 minutes for a story. It was an investigation. You never get that kind of time. But on this
That's a documentary.
It is. It was basically like a documentary. It was a year-long investigation that I did in the Department of Fish and Wildlife in Washington State. So they let it run. However, keep in mind, only one interview was 2 hours. Now I had to include multiple interviews in this. So I had to make a huge amount of editing choices. And that is where the reporter ultimately makes the decisions. Like, how do I tell this story fairly?
Hold on. Let's be honest about that. And I want to be transparent. You know, the reporter should have the ultimate say when it comes to what gets edited. But there's also got to be, a producer and a news director that is involved in that editing process when you're talking about something that's 8 minutes and 7 minutes in segments, right?
Well, I don't think my bosses ever saw the whole raw tapes. I think I was the only one, other than the photographer who worked with me on the project.
Well, let me ask you, was this a sweeps piece?
Yeah, it did fall into sweeps. Yep.
Oh, wow. Well, then your news director wasn't doing his or her job.
Oh, well, they would never sit down for hours and hours.
Well, then they was never doing their job.
Let me say this. Okay. So the Department of Fish and Wildlife came back and basically was saying that I selectively edited exactly what people were saying about 60 Minutes. So guess what I did? I released the entire 2 hours. I put the whole 2 hours on YouTube and I said, go ahead and watch it to your heart's content. And guess what? It made them look even worse. So actually, you know what? It worked to my advantage as far as journalism is concerned, because they look like bigger a-holes than they did when I even put the story together, because I was really trying to be fair to get their point across, even though, frankly, personally, I disagreed with a lot of what they were saying. But, yeah, sure. So I just put the whole thing out there. CBS still has not done that, and that's what you're going to see them talk about here. Okay, Bill, let me know if you can't hear it.
Harris's interview was simply edited for time. Quote, same question, same answer, but a different portion of the response. Now, I'm inclined to believe that's true for this question, but why not release the unedited version of the transcript? I get that it is not ordinary course of business, right? News organizations view that as their work product. They don't typically release transcripts of taped interviews, but this is different. It's a rare interview with a presidential candidate. And so it does leave me wondering if CBS is convinced releasing the transcript will just cause them more headaches. Joining me now is Mike Pesca. He's a former NPR correspondent, now host of The Gist, the longest running daily news podcast. Good to see you. You think I'm wrong? Tell me why.
Well, because news organizations should be independent and they shouldn't be cowed by political actors. And in this case, I take what CBS and
Bill,
60 Minutes is saying on faith.
We'll weigh in. Go ahead. No? Okay.
Well, no! Who is this guy? What the hell is he talking about?
He's trying to say, hey, they shouldn't release it under pressure from politicians, because they shouldn't just bend to public pressure. Which I guess I can kind of see what he's saying.
No, no. What about political pressure from the people who are casting votes? What
Well,
about
yeah, there's a lot of people out there. Right, you're right. It's not just Trump. I mean, he's looking at it as that, and I think that is one of the biggest problems with the way that the mainstream news looks at Trump and like the Trump phenomenon is they blame all this stuff they don't like on him,
Mm.
and they don't realize that he got elected by a lot of people. Like he's not really your issue in a lot of ways. They just think they think he has somehow brainwashed everybody, but they don't realize that the people are very sick and tired of the way that has been shoved down their throats for so long. Whether you agree that Trump's the answer to that, he didn't create that. But unfortunately, that's the way they look at it. So they look at this. Probably they even think the call to release the whole interview is just because Trump's drumming it up, not because a vast majority of Americans distrust the mainstream news, and that would that simmered up a long time ago. That wasn't a result of Trump. He just capitalized on that feeling. So okay, let's keep watching.
A question, and there was a 2-sentence answer. So in one instance, they played the first sentence, and then they played the second sentence. Let me ask you, why is it? How is it that we even know about this great deception? It's because CBS released it.
Right.
They played one part on Face the Nation and one part on 60 Minutes. This is not a deception. It might be selective editing, which is known as editing. But every day on The Gist, I will sit down, I'll talk to someone for 40 minutes, then we cut it up into a 22-minute interview. Am I deceiving anyone? No, I'm serving the listener.
Let's agree on
crafting a story.
Let's even presume.
Okay, let's stop there for a second. All right, Bill's having a heart attack, but selective editing, which is editing. Okay, on one hand, he makes a point. Here's the problem, and this is where both sides are going to get it wrong by taking kind of an extreme take on this. All right, he's right that it is very normal to edit. Okay, it is part of the process of journalism. It just is. There's no way around it. No one's going to sit through. I'm going to say no one, but most people are not going to watch 36,000 minutes. Okay. Okay, it's called 60 minutes for a reason. That's all people can watch. It's not 36,000 minutes. No one wants to watch 36,000 minutes of that guy with Kamala Harris. No one. They know that the ratings are going to tank. That's why it's called 60 minutes. Now, here's the problem that they don't recognize in the mainstream news when they're talking about this, that the quote selective editing or editing that they've been doing over the years has been deceptive. Now, they don't see it as deceptive because they're totally brainwashed by their own bias, and they sit there
Allie,
thinking, what?
I'm sorry. I addressed this in the first 60 seconds of this video. Unethical editing. We talked about this.
Yes.
You know, this was okay. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm just finishing to say that the problem is that the editing over time has become part of the activism and the advocacy that has inculcated newsrooms. And so it's the same reason they see like their encouragement of censorship and silencing people. They don't see this as contradictory to journalists who rely on the First Amendment. They don't see how this could come back and bite them because they somehow have this distorted view of journalism now is silencing people instead of asking questions, being curious, voracious debate, a variety of ideas. They in a lot of ways see their role as being kind of the goalie, the information goalie to protect public safety. So whereas we call it censorship, they call it public safety monitoring. They don't look at it the same way
Of course
that
they
we
do.
do. They just don't look at it the same way we do. So, and they don't think they ever make a mistake. That's the other problem too. They think they're just editing and there's no problem there. And they never make a mistake or they never have a bias that leaks in, that they're just doing this because they know what's best. I mean, it all stems from this idea. They know what's best. They know how to chop up an interview, just chill out and sit down and take their word for it. And that's what this guy is basically telling us is that, look, he does it all the time. It's not a big deal. What he's not willing, I agree on the first part of this, which is like, yeah, there's no way to just put everything out there raw on the show that's only 15 minutes long. On the other hand, they refuse to acknowledge the fact that the news organizations have become so just dripping with bias at this point, especially around election season, that it is deceptive editing. And they don't see it as deceptive because they think they're doing a public service. They like Harris, so they don't see it like, oh, well, we're just, we're showing what happened. No, your biases are leaking through and you're refusing to acknowledge them. All right, Bill, please go ahead. What did I get wrong? I can't hear
I'm
you.
just so
Oh,
sad
there
right
you go.
now.
You're sad.
I'm so. Oh, yeah, I'm sad. I'm so hurt that this passes as journalism right now. Wow, really? I never, 6 years ago, I got out of corporate media, journalism, whatever you want to call it. And never have I covered a story whereas anybody said, and here's the deal. People will say, oh, Bill, you were just low level Nashville, Louisville, I-65 corridor. And that's fine. But I've interviewed Muhammad Ali. I've interviewed presidential candidates. I've interviewed presidents, governors. Never once have I had an interview where if anybody said, hey, you edited this 2-hour interview and it's down to 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever the case may be. And, somebody said, you're not going to release the whole video. I'll release it. I don't care. The only reason you are not wanting to release the entire interview with anyone, whether it's the tornado chick, ain't nobody got time for that. If you from her all the way up to the presidential candidates is this.
Send me some of that. Man, Bill, where'd that all come
That's
from?
all it is.
Is that Monopoly
That's
money?
all it is.
Hey, over on AllisonMorrow.locals.com, where you'll get the entire show and you can ask questions ahead of time for interviews. $5 a month, great value, I think. The news has always been deceptive, DMSR says. We finally figured it out. Yes and no. The news has always been deceptive and biased. However, I do believe that it's worse now because they have whether they're entirely responsible for this or social media is or whatever, the public that likes them now is also on board with this whole slam dunking journalism activism type work. And so they like it when this kind of stuff happens or when they see, in other words, the stuff that shocks us. I think a lot of people who are, they like Rachel Maddow or Anderson Cooper, they think this stuff is good. They think it's great when the news silences Donald Trump, when they won't cover Donald Trump, when they cut his mic but they don't cut someone else's. They think that's great because they think Trump is an existential threat or whoever else besides him is an existential threat and they need the media to cut their brains off for them. And this will just say, like, I have heard crickets from my peers in mainstream media about my lawsuit. And you know what? I'm just going to bring it up. I wasn't even going to bring the lawsuit up, but I'm
let's talk about no, hold on. If we're going to talk about that, then you need to be a supporter only. And you need to
we'll talk about that as supporter only.
Yep.
But don't forget, you can go donate to the lawsuit. GiveSendGo.com/Allison Free Speech Fight. Okay, I'm suing the state of Washington for firing me over my podcast. I refuse to stop interviewing people and censoring people who had different perspectives on COVID, specifically doctors and scientists. I lost my job over it. If you want to support my expenses related to the lawsuit, traveling back and forth to Washington, childcare, time I'm going to have to take off work, GiveSendGo.com/Allison Free Speech Fight. Again, thank you so much to everybody who has already given over there. Totally overwhelmed by the support. Okay, yes, we're going to do the rest for supporters only. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, really appreciate you. We'll see you guys next time.